Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Waterside chat. We're just getting things going here. And as you come in, please remember to select your language channel. To hear the interpreted language only, choose mute original audio from the interpretation options. If you'd like to hear both the interpreted language and the original, do not choose mute original audio. And if you'd like to take a look at the full impact report, it is available in both English and Spanish at waterforpeople.org/impact report. And that link will be put in the chat as well. Our agenda for today is a brief welcome and overview. Then we'll go through some content slides for the 2022 impact report, taking a look at some of those highlights. And then we will have a Q&A time. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your toolbar to type in questions for our panelists. And then we'll have a brief closing. To get us started, I am going to introduce you to the global leadership team members who you'll be hearing from today. We have Katherine Williford, the Chief Growth Officer, Samson Bekele, our co-CEO, Mark Duey, our co-CEO, and Sarah Bramley, our Chief Impact Officer. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Katherine to take us through a little introduction to what we're going to be talking about today.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Daryl, for the great intro. I'm really excited for us to be talking about the theme of Beyond Water today. And really, as I've been reflecting on this theme, it's not even just beyond water, it's that so many things we might not think of are connected to water. It's all water, you might even say. Water and sanitation access are particularly interconnected with the environment, health, prosperity of communities, countries, and entire regions. So when we think about climate change affects water access for people worldwide through more devastating weather events and the associated floods, droughts, storms, and landslides. We're building resilience in the communities where Water for People works so that communities and people survive climate change. I know sometimes we think of climate change as something that's in the future, but we're seeing in real time in countries we work in, like Honduras, like Malawi, that this is happening now. The urgency is here. Health, we all agree no one should die from a preventable disease, and yet poor water and sanitation conditions are responsible for more than 829,000 deaths from diarrhea every year. Protecting water sources, safely disposing of waste, reaching hospitals with reliable water access, and hygiene training in schools all contribute to saving lives and livelihoods. Equity, and this is something I'm particularly passionate about, globally women and girls are responsible for water collection in 8 out of 10 households that don't have water on site. This burden impacts every aspect of a young girl's life: education, health, economic opportunity, and safe childbirth. From training women in business and civic leadership to establishing menstrual hygiene centers in schools, we're working to promote equity and opportunity for girls and women around the globe. Finally, economic development. In 2022, entrepreneurial trainings enhanced the work of pump mechanics, water sellers, pen emptiers, and hardware shop owners around the world. Businesses now contribute to the sustainability and longevity of water and sanitation services in their communities and establish economic stability for their families.
Great, thanks, Katherine. As we kick off today, we wanted to take a little bit of time to reflect on the progress that we've made in 2022. It relates very clearly to the 4 categories that Katherine just talked about. And so, we often talk about water and sanitation as our kind of key indicators, looking at that access. But all of those things that Katherine talked about roll together to really ensure that these are the water and sanitation is making the impact on the lives of people that we work with in the way we want it to. And so you can see the numbers here. We're really quite excited to have reached more than 200,000 people, almost 300,000 people with sanitation, and more than 200,000 with water and hygiene education as well. In addition, we worked with more than 170 schools, more than 20 health clinics, and in 500 communities around the world. We're also focusing more and more on our national impact work. So really ensuring that as we're looking at not just access, but sustainability, that the enabling environment, that the national environment is supportive of keeping these services going into the long run. And so one of the things that we did in this past year was to do analysis at the national level on the washed sectors in 6 countries. And that allowed us to be able to get a better picture of what's currently keeping us from reaching all of the people that we want to in each country. Additionally, we know that we can't do this work alone. That if we want to see work happen and reach more people beyond the work that Water for People is doing as an individual organization. And so through additional system strengthening approaches, we're reaching scale in 36 areas. And next slide, please, Daryl. We enjoy celebrating milestones. And so in 2022, we reached some really exciting milestones. You can see the key on the left-hand side. Blue represents water, green represents sanitation. You can see that we reached a number of community milestones, really focusing on our everyone. We have some additional forever milestones that we're continuing to work towards. And one of the things that we're looking forward to as we continue to work towards more of our national level work and our scale work is cracking the nut on some of our forever, some of those things that really work towards sustainability. So some very, very exciting accomplishments in 2022. Great. Next slide, and over to you, Mark.
Actually, Samson's going to take this one. Go ahead, Samson.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Samson is having some difficulty joining. So Mark, if you wouldn't mind.
Got it. I'm happy to cover this. Yes. So hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. And yes, so India and Africa, we have programs. We have a long program that's been running in India that initially was focused on arsenic removal back in the late 90s. We now have 2 entities in India. One is a Water for People India Trust, and then also we have a branch office in India. And so through those 2 entities, we are able to create impact at multiple levels. And the opportunity for impact in India is just tremendous. And I'll talk about that here a little bit more in a couple of minutes. But in Africa, we have 4 country programs, as you can see here: Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Malawi. And for some of you, Tanzania might be the one that jumps out because it's actually our newest country program. So we're very excited that as of around October of last year, we were able to start a country program in Tanzania. The office is based in Dodoma, which is the political capital of Tanzania. And we have a small team there, and we're just starting to get our impact work going. So we're really excited about expansion to Tanzania. It was a long and thorough process to evaluate a number of different countries in Africa for our first expansion country in a long time. But we're just all really excited about where things are headed with our program there and the opportunity for some really significant impact in Tanzania. So let's go to the next one. We'll talk about Latin America. So in Latin America, we've had 5 different country programs across Latin America for a number of years now, all with really interesting success at the local level, at national level with success at varying degrees. And one of our biggest challenges last year was that in Nicaragua, we actually had to make a difficult decision to close our country program in Nicaragua. A couple of factors. One, with our new strategy, not only focusing on local impact, but also on national impact, we recognize that collaboration with the government in Nicaragua has been a challenge, and creating that national level impact also, therefore, in the coming years, also a challenge. it's also been a difficult context for nonprofits like ours to operate in an increasingly complex environment due to the political environment there. So we had to make the difficult decision to close our operation in Nicaragua. Fortunately, some of the great work that we were able to start there continues on with the district WASH offices, which were our most important partners for the local impact work in the two districts where we had focused. Let's go on to the next slide, and I'll talk more about our national impact work. So in all of our current countries, including the most recent country program, Tanzania, we have some really interesting national impact initiatives that are either well underway or just getting started. One of the most important learnings, I think, for Water for People in the last several years has been, I guess, given that Water for People's reputation is quite strong for our Everyone Forever local impact model, where we partner with local governments and communities, and in many cases, co-finance infrastructure for water and sanitation. And we also work to ensure that the systems are in place for sustainable services for water and sanitation to be available for those families for generations. That local impact work has been really great, but we've recognized a number of the obstacles to keeping those services in place for generations for those families have to be addressed at the national level. And sometimes those require policy change. Sometimes those require really advocacy for increasing the allocation of financial resources by national governments to the water and sanitation sector. And sometimes it's around adding capacity, so increasing the level of capacity at the level of government that's really kind of between that central government and the local governments that provide support to communities. So about strengthening institutions and such. So a couple of examples here that I'll talk about. Guatemala, we were instrumental in helping to create a new vice ministry of water in that country, and that will allow for much more significant progress to be made in that national space with prioritization of water and sanitation. Another thing that we've done there has been to build a national monitoring system. So there's just been such a lack of data. Often we go to meetings in the capital city. There's not really clarity around what is the situation out there. How many communities are still left without water or sanitation services, and families, and what are the experiences? What are the levels of service? So we're playing a key role there to work with the national government to create a monitoring system so that those questions, that data gap can be eliminated. In Bolivia, we've taken a slightly different path. We're focusing our work on the national impact in Bolivia with a federation of municipalities. So it's an entity that where the local governments come together regularly, and there's a lot of learning and agreements around different aspects of development, including water and sanitation. And we're working through that federation of municipalities to expand our local impact model into 20 of the most vulnerable municipalities in that country. I'll also mention India. I actually had the opportunity to visit India about a month and a half ago and had just a tremendous experience there. India is just a fascinating country in that the level of investment by the government in sanitation from 2014 to 2019 and now in piped drinking water is truly unprecedented. And so what Water for People's focus and our value add now in India is much less on the actual build out of the infrastructure, because the government's taking care of that, but there are so many challenges related to the sustainability of those services. How do we ensure that the water resources themselves are sustainable over time, that operation and maintenance is happening? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of communities that are at risk of having infrastructure built, but then services collapsing or not being available after, sometimes just a year or two. That what we're doing is really identifying thought leaders in India who we can hire and then second to the state governments. And so the state governments will benefit from a lot of our experience, our knowledge on how to keep services going over time for all of these families. So we call those technical support units. And we have those established in a couple of states already, and we're looking to expand those through a couple of partnerships to potentially as many as 7 states in India. And then in Rwanda, just briefly, we are now working with basically half the country, about 15 of the 30 districts, to develop investment plans with clear budgets around water and sanitation. And while Rwanda is a country in Africa that is prioritizing water and sanitation with financial resources, also with external agencies bringing funding in. But our role in working together with the Ministry of Infrastructure in Kigali has really been key also in that monitoring system space as well, to help them understand where are the gaps and to be able to direct investment to hopefully achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 6 in Rwanda, being one of the first countries in Africa to achieve that. So really excited about the developments in Rwanda as well. And again, on national impact, we have some really exciting work in all 9 of the countries where we're doing. Just wanted to highlight these 4 as examples of things that are really exciting right now. Let's go to the next one, Daryl. So our strategy, Destination 2030, Sarah's already mentioned a bit about the national impact work, and then I've just covered some specific examples of that. But really, again, our strategy, which we call Destination 2030, is focused on leveraging learning from years of the local impact everyone forever model work that we've been doing, and really scaling that and informing national government initiatives in these countries to support them to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is our focus. And so another aspect of our Destination 2030 strategy that I want to mention is the collective impact model. So we recognize that there are many actors out there who are working in this space, and together we're greater. And so we've identified a couple of other organizations. We've created a formal alliance with those organizations, and that has allowed us to also expand our geographic footprint into a number of other countries where we don't have country programs, but then also to leverage learning from those organizations and develop a common influence agenda. So those are the main highlights of our Destination 2030 strategy, which will carry us up through the Sustainable Development Goals period.
Thank you, Mark, Sarah, and Katherine. And I want to welcome Samson, who I've been working behind the scenes to get on. So hi, Samson. Thank you for joining us.
Hi,
we're going to
Diane.
transition
I apologize.
It happens all the time. We're going to transition now to our Q&A portion. So just a reminder to use the Q&A feature on your toolbar if you want to ask questions. And I'll go ahead and stop the screen sharing so that we can all get a good view of whoever's speaking. And Katherine, take it away.
Thanks, Daryl. And I'll start with some questions we pre-collected, and then I'm happy to continue the conversation with the additional questions in the chat. So first off, Sarah, can you share some climate change mitigation and adaptation measures that we have implemented in 2022 or 2023?
Thanks, Katherine. And thanks to the person who asked the question around climate change. Climate change is, as Katherine said, very much upon us, and it is something that we are continuing to think more and more about as Water for People, and really making it central to the work that we're doing, because we can't do WASH work if we're not also thinking about climate change and the effects that it has. We've seen in the past several months cyclones both in Peru and Malawi, and we're seeing that increased weather pattern really doing damage across many of the places where Water for People is working. And so one of the things that we began in 2022 is a learning series, helping to upgrade our knowledge on what does climate change mitigation and adaptation look like. And so one of the things that I think is coolest about our work in the past year is this skill building that's happened through a series of what we call climate clinics. And we're doing this in collaboration with one of our partners in the One for All Alliance with IRC. And it's a skill building, ongoing conversation and series of workshops where implementers across both organizations are having an ongoing conversation about what are the best practices? What is the best knowledge out there, and what does that look like? One of the things that I think is really important as we continue to address climate change is that it is much more than infrastructure. Infrastructure is critical, and ensuring that there is flexibility in delivery of service, that we're upgrading infrastructure so that pipes are buried appropriately and are going to withstand the effects of climate change. It's also really important that we have national policies that support that. And so, when there is good regulation, it means that not just Water for People, but everybody who is doing infrastructure development is going to have a responsibility to plan infrastructure that is resilient. So I think that looking at those policies, and as we talked about, as we get into more national level work, working with governments to understand what does resilience look like, and how can they support resilience in what they're funding and how they're operating. That brings us to a question, though, of what does resilience actually mean? And part of our work that we've begun in 2022 and are looking forward to as we continue into 2023 and beyond is helping the global community understand better what does resilience mean, and looking for an indicator that's going to be measured through the Joint Monitoring Program on resilience. So we're not just looking at how many people are gaining access, but how many people are gaining resilient access. So it's an ongoing conversation, and I think it's one that I'm excited is taking effect at all levels of our work.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm struck that climate change is almost just further emphasizing what we've been talking about for a long time, which is that sustainable change means more than infrastructure for a myriad of reasons. Thanks for sharing that great work that's happening. Next up, Mark, can you describe one or more recent technical tools that are making clean water available for small communities?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Catherine. So there's several different types of drinking water systems that Water for People supports, usually co-financing with local or national governments in the different countries where we work. One of them doesn't use electricity at all, and that's the traditional gravity-fed drinking water system, where springs are available that might be at a higher elevation than the community that's being targeted for the support. A spring is identified, and then some kind of catchment structure is built, and then there's a pipeline to a storage tank, which is usually located near the community, and then a distribution network that takes the drinking water out to each household. And so with that, there's often several different levels of treatment. One is kind of a basic filtration of that spring water in case there are issues of contaminants, and then often, almost always, there's also chlorination that's taking place, usually at the storage tank. So that's one. Another is where springs aren't available, we commonly depend upon groundwater as the drinking water source. So a well will be constructed, and then pumping to an elevated storage tank that's built, usually just kind of a water tower, will be used to capture sufficient quantity of water to supply the community. And then from that tower, a distribution network like many of the communities in North America would have, with piped water connection going to each residence. And again, with those, there's often different types of drinking water treatment technologies that are used at the actual storage tank, and almost always chlorination as a disinfection. And I guess perhaps one of the most interesting and recent developments with that type of system is an increasing amount of solar pumping that's been going into that type of system instead of depending upon the electric grid. With solar becoming so available, even at household level in a lot of the countries where we work, just basic small scale solar household level power generation. Solar is now an economically viable option in many of the places where we work to serve as the energy source for the pumps on these types of systems. So hopefully that's enough engineering speak for today. Catherine, thanks for the question.
Thanks, Mark. Perfect amount of engineering speak. Next up, Samson, a big question for you. Your major lessons learned in 2022.
Thank you very much, Catherine. We have learned a lot of lessons, but I'll just pick 3 to highlight. The first one is really our increased realization that water and sanitation, or improving access to sustainable water and sanitation services, does not happen in a vacuum, and how it interacts with other really important things for people's lives, such as climate, health, education, social justice, nutrition, etc., and how this realization impacts on our programming of water and sanitation, and how we also need to build our own capacity to improve our programming so that the impact of our programs will be greater. And in some cases, also how we can partner with other organizations who specialize in these areas. And one of the really important developments in this area, although it happened after the end of the 2022 financial year, is the All Systems Connect Symposium that we put together with our partners, IRC and Water for Good. And we learned a lot from organizations who specialize in these areas, coming and sharing their experience, how they look at the system entirely, not just by sector or by department. So that's one important learning for us. Another lesson is we started our first major USAID grant as a prime in Rwanda, and we have now learned how to successfully put together applications to a major donor like USAID, and the way the USAID program in Rwanda has been put together is really a continuation of the national system strengthening work that we have been doing with the government of Rwanda, as Mark briefly touched on this. So that has given us a lot of confidence on the one hand that we can do that, but also on the other hand, donors like USAID are now looking at more strengthening national and local systems, not just focusing on infrastructure. And a third area very quickly is in 2022, we opened a new country program in Tanzania, and in difficult circumstances, we closed a country program in Nicaragua. And from that process, again, we've learned a lot of lessons how to do these processes more effectively and efficiently going forward. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Samson. Great reflections, and hard to believe we're already halfway into 2023 too. Next up, shifting to impact and sustainability, Mark. Can you share any new strategies we've been looking at to increase impact, improve sustainability in wash services around the world?
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. So I want to go back real quick again to India, and what I briefly mentioned earlier when I was talking about national impact. Really, the change in the India context in water and sanitation has been quite rapid. Again, from 2014 to 2019, the government of India supported the construction of close to 100 million toilets across that country. Right now, they're in the middle of an infrastructure build out with an investment of around $50 billion to try to achieve piped water connections for all rural Indian households by March of next year. So again, the challenge there has been ensuring that sustainability aspects are considered during this rapid and massive infrastructure build out, because India, if it's not already, will soon be the country in the world with the most piped water infrastructure. It must not become the country in the world with the most failed piped water infrastructure, and there's a significant risk there. And so again, what we're doing in India, I'm really excited about. It's creating at the state government level additional capacity, hiring some thought leaders that understand sustainability and the different aspects of it, including water resources management, including operation and maintenance, and building that into these programs as the government of India builds out all of this infrastructure to make sure that these services last for generations. So I'm very excited about the work that our team has done to already create these technical support units in 2 states. Had an opportunity to visit with colleagues who are working in those in a couple of places, and then our team's plans in India to expand that model out to as many as potentially 7 total states through partnerships. Our local work has just been such a resource of learning and understanding of what works and what doesn't. With communities and at district level, now's the time. It's just a perfect storm of everything kind of coming together for us to be able to take that, offer that, share that, build that into this initiative, and quite frankly, stop investing in infrastructure at all in India, unless there's some very unique reason to do so, and focus almost entirely on forever on the sustainability aspect of the work and in support of that government's goals.
Thanks, Mark. And I know we have a lot of donors on the call, so I'm just going to put a plug. That kind of highly leveraged, highly impactful work Mark is talking about is some of the hardest work for us to fundraise for, because we're not doing as much of that direct implementation that is so exciting to see in a grant proposal. So as you all have feedback about ways to make that really highly exciting influence work more tangible and more fundable from your perspective, we are here with ears open, ready to talk. I'm sorry, I broke the rules of being interviewer only. Next up, Sarah, how is the global expansion of the D30 Destination 2030 plan going? What partners does Water for People have or need?
Thanks, Catherine. I think that as a facilitator, you get to make the rules. So, yeah. So, our entry into Destination 2030 is a really exciting one, and we've talked about it a fair amount already through the call. One of the things that we've been working really hard on over the past several months is taking our global strategy and interpreting it at country level. And so each country program has been working for the last couple months on really what does Destination 2030 mean to them? How does that get interpreted in their local context? And what combination of local impact or working at scale or national is each program going to take in order to make the most impact possible? Hearing about India is such a remarkable context and so different from, say, Bolivia, where there's also some really exciting work happening, but the conversations that are happening in each country are just really different. And so with Destination 2030, it really asks us to be intentional about what those differences are, and to drive our implementation to that. And so I think that we'll be seeing some exciting interpretations of what that looks like in each country as we go forward. We've also talked about partnership on this call. So One for All is our alliance that we have working with Destination 2030. And right now we are 3 members, Water for People, IRC WASH, and Water for Good. And what makes this alliance unique is that we all follow the Destination 2030 strategy. So gone are the days where we have separate organizational strategies. We are all aligned towards Destination 2030, and we're all measuring towards Destination 2030. And so our counting is all coming together. We all share a common theory of change, and we all share a common results framework. And that's pretty unique in the sector and frankly in development. But we know that that is one way that we can commit to sharing a voice. And so I think that that's incredibly exciting. But we continue to work with other partners as well. And so we are continuing to be in a network that's called Agenda for Change, which also focuses on system strengthening. And so we use our voice there to talk about what does system strengthening mean, and we learn from others. And that learning is really important. We work very closely with a network called Sanitation and Water for All, which again is looking at that kind of bigger government level change. And so working very closely with partners on that. And then our local partners remain. And so we work very, very closely with district WASH officers. We work very closely with local government, with regional government, with national government partners, as well as other actors within each country. And so the networks that we're building globally are also reflected in our local level work, or country level work. And we are members of groups like the Uganda Water and Sanitation Network and equivalent networks in Malawi, Tanzania, and others, where we share experiences and ensure that we are not duplicating work, that we're sharing one voice when we talk with government. I love partnership.
Thanks, Sarah. One final question before we go into questions in the chat. This one is for you, Samson. Can you name the 2 biggest priorities or agenda issues for the next year?
Thanks, Katherine, and I'll be brief because Sarah touched on what I believe are our 2 biggest priorities for next year. One is, as both Sarah and Mark mentioned earlier, we've put together our Destination 2030 strategy together with our partners, IRC, WASH, and Water for Good. And now our highest priority is how to embed and contextualize the national impact pathway work that we have articulated in the Destination 2030 strategy in our country program strategies that are being put together under the leadership of Sarah. So that's really exciting. And then the second area is, how do we learn from great work that is happening across our country programs, as well as our Alliance member organization country programs, to enhance our impact going forward? And I just would like to share with the audience that I came back from Malawi this morning, 5.5 hours ago, at my desk, and I had the privilege of visiting our work in districts in Malawi this week and in Rwanda last week. And those of us who are privileged to go around and see our work and spend time with our colleagues and meet with our particularly government partners, etc., see so many really good practices happening in different countries. And the challenge for us is, how do we actually bring these bits of really great practices from different countries, and those that are, contextually relevant in other circumstances as well, we make sure that those happen, so that it's not only 2 or 3 good things happening in one country and then 2 or 3 other good things happening in another country. So that's something that we are going to focus on. Thank you.
Thanks, Samson. And it looks like we've organically answered most of the questions in the chat. One that I think I'll start with you, Sarah, is around what steps we're taking to monetize our goals. And I followed up a little bit with Mark about what he meant. He said installing a private profit motive for our activities, similar to how that's been done in the environmental movement. We do work with the private sector in a variety of ways, but I don't know if there are new ways you want to speak to, Sarah, or anyone on the panel.
Yeah, and I might open this up to Mark and Samson as well. I think that one of the things that we recognize is that in order for work to be sustainable, there needs to be local market. And I'm not sure this is exactly what you're asking, Mark, but this is the answer I'm going to go with, and Mark and Samson can jump in as well. It's important to make sure that the local market is available for things like spare parts, for things like being able to purchase a toilet. So we are working on increasing market for those kinds of services, ensuring that that there are locally available materials for private sector entities to make repair on latrines, on water pumps, etc. But Mark and Samson, I'll toss over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So yes, and so there are lots of different ways to go with this question, but I think one thing I want to mention is that we are really experimenting with the involvement of private sector as a service provider in countries where it is legal. The water policy in some countries is such that rural water service provision must and will be done through community-based management, and that's really the only option. And I'm thinking particularly about the Latin American context. We do have some countries. One that sticks out in my mind is Rwanda, where the involvement of private local businesses that serve as private sector water service providers to operate and maintain the infrastructure once it's built has been something we've had a lot of learnings there too. It's not everything's going well. There are some challenges with sustainability. There are different types of challenges in getting the incentives right with the local government and with central government. But at least we have that flexibility to work on multiple options for service provision in a country like Rwanda. Uganda, similar, also quite a bit of flexibility in terms of trying to find what's best for communities in terms of the long-term service provision for water.
Thanks, Mark. And I know we're approaching end of the hour. So with that, I will give a big thank you to our panelists, Sarah, Mark, and Samson. Thank you for lending your expertise. And a big kudos to Daryl for all the planning and soliciting of questions. This is a great presentation and appreciate all you did to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone on the panel and everyone who participated. Those were such great questions. We had such a great conversation about not only the impact highlights, but also some of the challenges of the past year. So really appreciate everyone taking the time to put thoughtful questions in their registration and in the Q&A feature. If you've been inspired by anything you've heard here today, we have a new resource to share with you. I just put a link in the chat to our new Wavemaker community. This is a volunteer hub for people who want to make a difference, spread education and awareness about the global water crisis, as well as our work here at Water for People. So please do check out that new resource. And with that, I will say we're at time, and thank you once again for joining us. The recording will be sent out shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you all.
Thanks, everyone.